Hello, I'm Dr. Ron England, and this is part of the series on collections, and these are the collection classes that are available in C#. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you, I just created a simple page to demonstrate one of the different types of collections that we work with all the time, which is an array list. And if you're familiar with an array, then you're probably going to be fairly familiar with the concept of an array list. An array list itself is a collection, except that it doesn't actually have to be dimensioned at before compile time. It can dynamically expand. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to show you a demonstration of the use of the array list, and then I want to show you how we actually did this. So first I'm going to populate the array list, and I've created a form to do that, and I'm going to put A, C, and D as my elements of the array, and I'm going to hit create. And what that's going to do is it's going to come down here and it's going to populate two data bound elements that are going to be bound to the array list that I created. One is a list box, there's my list box, and one is a grid view, and there's my grid view right there. Now, what I'm going to do is, you know what, I'm missing B. So I'm going to go ahead and hit B, and I'm going to hit add to list. So now if you noticed, it added A, B, C, D, A, B, C, D, they're all in the list. It sorted the list, and now let's look at this. Let's say if I look at list index 0, okay, well that's the A, you can see that. If I look at list index 1, that's the B. 2, that's the C, and 3, that's the D. And if I go to 4, I'm now going to bust it, or I'll do 5. I'm now going to bust it because guess what? I'm out of range. Okay, which you would normally want to capture something that would come out of range, but we're not going to worry about that right now. So let's go ahead and stop this and let's look at the code. I'm not going to really go over the details of the interface code. Those will be on, I'll have the ASPX code available to you on my page, on the class page that goes with this lecture. But let's look at specifically at what we did behind the scenes. So this is the code behind for the ArrayList example page, and I've got some things that I did here, and I did actually try to write the code a little bit towards good coding conventions. So the first thing that I did is if you hit the button create array, it's going to create the array, and it's going to do that by creating it from the string that you put into that text box. Remember, you put A, comma, B, comma, C. We put those comma delimited here. So let's look at how we did that. So I did that by calling fill list and then bind list, which are two methods that I wrote. So I have this protected void fill list. Now the first thing I have to have is I actually have to have the list. Well, because I'm using the list through multiple refreshes, let's look up that declaration of the object list, which is right here. Public static array list equals a new array list. Notice that I didn't give it any dimensions. This is in systems.collections. Okay, so it's an actual object that's available to you in systems.collections. And I made it static because I want it to actually be maintained statically between refreshes of the screen so that I don't lose the state of the object between the refreshes of the screen. Now I could have done it other ways, but this is the way that I did it in this case. So now this object is going to basically be permanent on this page throughout refreshes of this page. And let's look at how we actually filled this list. So the first thing that I did is a very simple thing that I do all the time. If I have a string that's delimited by something, I just use the split method, which is a method of string. Since the text box that I entered the string into, the text property that returns a string, this is going to return a string array. So my string array, S1, is going to be implicitly created from this. It's going to have the same number of elements that that text box had. Then I'm going to go ahead and, in this case, I'm going to take that list. I'm going to make sure that it's empty. It's clear, nothing in it. And now I want to start adding things to the list. Now I've actually created the string array, S1. And I've cleared the list so there's nothing left over from another time that I hit it, because I can actually hit that button over and over again and add more and more things to that. I want to start fresh. So I'm going to use the for each. Well, S1 is an array of strings. So for each string S2 in S1, this is going to loop through all the elements of the string array S1, and each element is going to be S2, and I'm simply going to add S2 to the list, which will be a new element in the list. Okay, that's it. Now I've got an array list that is essentially an array of those strings. And the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to bind the list. Now one of the beauties of an array list is that it's sortable. So I'm going to call the sort method of the list. It's also bindable. It means it's data bindable. So I'm going to set the list box. Remember there's a list box and a grid view. I'm going to set the data source equal to the list, and then I'm going to bind it. Okay, I'm going to take the grid view, which is GV list. I'm going to set the data source equal to the list, and I'm going to bind it also. That way you actually see both of those showing up in with the elements in there. Okay, so that actually did that, and it bound it. Well, the next thing that I did was I had this button add to list. Because remember, I added an element to it after I'd already created it. One of the beauties of this of ArrayList is that I can do that. It's a very nice collections object that I can do that. So I did list.add, and this time I added to the list the text of the text box with that add. And then I bound it again. Okay, and this time I bound the list, and I bound the grid view. I took the list, I added that one element to it, I sorted again, that way the B actually ended up in alphabetical order with them. I rebound them, and you could see the results. The last thing I did is I actually show the index from the index, because remember, it is still integer index. It's still a list array, and it's integer index just like any array would be. I pulled in the integer from that index that I put in there, and then I just basically put into the label the list element at array converted to a string so that it could actually show as a text. Okay, one more time so you can actually see the whole thing put together again. Okay, A, C, D, create it. There they are down there in the list box in the grid view, which is what you saw that I did. I'm going to add element B, add to list. Notice it now has been added to the list. And I can look at index 0 is A, index element 1 is B. Notice it shows the sorted version of that. 2 is C, 3 is D, and since there's only 4 elements, if I put in 4, because we're at 0 index, if I put in 4, it's going to go ahead and throw an exception, which I did not capture in this case, so it's going to throw an exception. Hopefully this is enough so that you really understand the concept of an array list. This is part of my series on collections, and we will be looking at other different types of collections. Thank you very much. Good programming.